Okay, let's try again with this crop then. Hopefully there's a bit more room. There is this time. Okay, so we're going to try and crop to a point which will remove those ends of the bricks there. Okay, so let's have a go. See what we can do. I'm going to come in and probably crop it to here because it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. There might need to be an extra screw actually on this just because of the nature of the brickwork towards the top, although we could probably paint that out, which I think is probably what we'll do. So I'm going to crop it to there, and I'm going to crop it to here. Okay, so if you slightly decrease the size of our map, but I think it's been good for tidying elements up. Okay, so let's have a look at how we could make this tileable then. Right, so we've had a look at this idea of kind of unskewing it. We've looked at kind of reducing some of the areas where we think there's going to be issues with the wraparound with the seams. Now the next thing we'd want to do will be to actually look at the colour itself. Before we do any more tidying up of this thing, is actually have a look at the colour itself. Now, if we look at our image, and I'll zoom in a touch, we've got a lot of shaded areas and a lot of highlight areas. Now, I said in a previous video that what we really want to do is would be to get our highlight and our shade from our in-scene lighting. We don't want it to be embedded into our texture map. Otherwise, we're kind of beholden to the lighting of the environment that this thing was filmed in, and that's not really what we want. Okay, so we're going to look at some techniques we could use to try and remove some of that stuff. Okay, so again, I'm going to duplicate this because I like to keep a kind of an archive of everything. I'm going to remove these straight lines off here now. So if I go into view and then I go into clear guides, I can get rid of that. Those are now clear. In fact, I can turn off those rulers as well, so we'll turn that off, gives us a little bit more space on screen to work with. Okay, so the things we're going to look at here are just kind of they're kind of filters really, but we'll go into image adjustment, and we'll see we've got one called shadows and highlights. Okay, so automatically, without me even doing anything, it starts to reduce some of the shadow and highlight that we see in our image. Okay, so I'm going to click here to show more options because it's quite useful to have these options in here, and I'm going to just keep my eyes peeled on some of these shadowed areas. Now as I up this amount, and I'll go quite a way here, you'll see it'll start to flatten out the image. It's reduced a little bit of the shadow in there. That's probably a little bit too excessive, but we've also got the tone that we can shift. Okay, so you can see then, so in doing that again, it's flattening out the image, it's reducing some of the shadow, but it's also lost quite a lot of the colour. So we need to be careful of that. Now we can add more colour back in by kind of adjusting the colour and kind of resaturating it back with colour, but I think that is probably pushing it just a little bit too far. We don't want to lose too much of our colour. Now the radius, it's a little bit like the sample radius of the filter that we're using. I'm going to leave that fairly low. I think that's pulled out probably a little bit of the shadow, so I'm just going to turn off the preview so you can see the difference. It's reduced some of the shadow in that we see in some of those areas, although at the expense of losing some of the colour. I'd like to also look at reducing some of the highlight in there. Again, that will also bring back a little bit of the brickwork sort of colour. Reducing the highlight. I don't want to go too far, otherwise this kind of a sort of orangey sort of mess. I don't want that. I will readjust the colour to perhaps bring a little bit more in. The mid-tones need to be careful of, so I'm just going to have a little bit of play with that. And let's look at the difference. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so it's reduced a lot of the highlight, it's reduced a lot of the shade, but it's really kind of thrown out quite a lot of our colour. Now we could start to bring that back in. It's not the end of the world. We could kind of bring that back in a little bit more later, but I'm going to still continue to just play with some of these values and see if I can bring back some of my own colour. Okay, again, got a little bit orange. Turn on my preview again. I do want to keep that amount fairly high for the shadows. Okay, let's have a look then at just pulling back the colour a touch in here. How far are we off now? That's not so bad. It's taken out some of our shadow and maintained the colour. That's pretty good. I mean, we've got some elements of shadow we're going to struggle to shift, but it's done a decent job of it. Okay, so we'll keep that. We'll OK that there. So that's using the shadow and highlight tool there. Again, it allows you to remove some of the shadow and the highlight, hence the name. Now, the next thing I'd like to have a look at would be looking at how we can reduce some of the seams that we get there. Okay, now the only real way to do that, let me just push that to one side. It's slightly annoying. Let's see if I can dock it there and pop it out of the way. I can't, so we'll see if I can just move it out of the way for now. Okay, it'll do there. The only way we can do that is to actually force this to tile itself. So we're going to tell it to offset itself slightly. And we do that by going into filter. In fact, before I do, I'll make another copy and keep my archive going. We're going to go into filter. So other kind of filter, and then we're going to say offset. Sometimes it will give you a default sort of an offset in there. We won't go for that. We're just going to force it to offset itself very slightly. Let me just keep going until I'm happy that I've got a reasonable offset to work with. I'm pretty certain that you should be able to see where the offset actually is. It's here. This is, or rather where the wraparound is, because that's what it's called, colour wraparound. What we lose from this side, it pops in at the other side. But it's not awful. It's actually a pretty good match. You know, we've done a decent job already just by cropping things down. But we will need to remove these elements, maybe tidy this one up. That's a problem. That's a problem. So you can see where the seam is. You can see where the seam is there. And obviously we've lost the bottom section of this and the bottom section of that. So we'd have to tidy those elements up. Maybe a little bit of the colour's an issue there. So that's one thing we'll do. So we'll have a look at tidying up that seam, then we'll offset it vertically as well, and then we'll look at tidying that seam. Okay, so we're going to leave that offset. To make this easy for myself, I'm going to offset it by 1000, nice round number. Then we'll go in and have a look at how we can start to tidy this up. So I'm just going to move across here. I can see a very clear seam running across this section. I'll zoom out a touch so we can see. Now I'm going to use a combination of a few different tools here. The first of which is this one just sat here, and it's called the healing brush. Let me just hover over that so you can see. Okay, the spot healing brush, and you can see there's a little rollout that shows you what it actually does, and you can see it heals and removes any, let's say, anomalies. It looks for patterns and thinks, well, that doesn't form part of the original sort of background image, so maybe I'll try and remove that. Okay, so we'll click on that one. I will zoom back in and give you a little demo of this run along the top. It is brush size dependent, so I'm going to use my square bracket keys, which are over to the right of my keyboard. If I do this kind of thing, you can see it will completely heal that, but removes the brick, or the mortar area of the brick. So yeah, that looks great. It's done a wonderful job of healing up the area of the brick, but it's removed also that element which we kind of need to keep at least one of. Okay, so let me go back in here, spot healing brush, back to my offset. Okay, so that's one we could definitely use for these areas where we've very clearly got elements where there's a line that runs down things. If maybe a slightly smaller version of that brush would be helpful. So we could probably use that in areas like this where we want to remove that line and things. You can also sample an area, which is quite useful. So if I hold down the Alt key, I could sample an area, say something like this. Okay, and it will tell you the spot healing brush automatically samples pixels to correct the spot with one step. To manually set the source, use the healing brush tool. Right, so there is a further tool we could use, and we'll find that just in here. So the spot healing brush, you don't need to sample an area. If you go into here like healing brush tool, it will allow you to take a chunk, which is again using the Alt key. I'll use this one because we've got a problem there. So if I say take this bit, see how it's taken that piece I've sampled. And if you can see, it's dragging that piece round, and then I can start to paint over the top of areas, and it's trying to heal it based upon the sample I've just taken. Now the issue with that, of course, was when I sampled that, I sampled an area that also took a little bit of this dark shaded area with it. So we've got this weird dark shaded area and this bit. So again, I'll undo that. So I need to be very careful about the way I'm using this tool. I'm going to use it based on taking that black area there and then dragging that across. Then I'll take maybe part of this brickwork here and then I'll pull down there. To be careful that I don't end up doing something like this where it's now sampling. And if you can see, there's a little cross which is following things around on screen, and it's also sampling all the grooves and things, which I clearly don't want, so I'll undo that. So let's use a combination of those two tools, and in fact a further extra tool as well, to see if we can tidy things up. I'm going to go back to my spot healing brush because I actually quite like the idea that it auto sort of samples the region. Use my space bar to work my way down. I'm going to try and sample that section there. Maybe I can just force it to give me a corner. These bits we'll have to be careful with. We'll tidy those up separately. So I'm going to come in here, try and get that. It's actually done something with a bit more of a straight line there, which I don't want. So I'm using my spot healing tool to just remove any of those very clear seams. These bits, these big chunks, we'll do that a different way. Let's work our way down. There's a little bit of a seam there, which we can see. One here again. I'm just going to do something like that to tidy this kind of thing. I might go slightly bigger brush so it's doing a bigger sort of sample size for some of these. I'm working my way all the way down, missing out any which are too bigger, sort of an error to fix in this way. If you've got things like this which are clearly there's a disparity in terms of the colour, because this is much more orange, it's a little bit kind of redder, then you can afford just maybe do a slightly longer sort of sample, something like that, and it will try and do a bit of a blend across. And we're all the way to the bottom now, so we'll work our way through. With this one, again, we'll tidy this bottom bit up using a different technique. A little bit of an obvious sort of a seam on that one. Okay, so let's just zoom out a touch. So I think where the line type seams were, that's done a decent job. Where these extra little bricks are, we'll need to do something subtly different. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to use this clone stamp tool, which is just here. Now again, I'll hover over so you can see the little video clip, and you can see what it's done there. It's sampled in a region of the image, and it's allowing you to transport that somewhere else. So it's kind of cloning an extra section of the image and then transporting it somewhere else to stamp down, hence the clone stamp name that you get. So again, we'll zoom in. I'll show you the way that this works. Use my space bar. I'm just going to move across. Okay, so let's try and rid ourselves of one of these. Okay, so we'll use our clone stamp tool. Again, remember we use the Alt key to sample a region. That's Alt on, Alt off. We're going to sample a region which we want to take, and then we're going to use that to remove ourselves, or rather paint over something. What I tend to do is not sample something which is very close to the thing that you're painting in, otherwise you get too much repetition in that area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample the corner of this brick here. I'm going to go up here and go a slightly bigger brush, and you'll be able to see where my brush is. It's kind of revealing a section there which I can stamp on. I've just realised that my brush is a little bit probably too soft edged. I'm just going to harden that up just a little bit, and then we'll go back in again, something like that. So you can see what I did. I put that in there. So let's use the Alt key, and we'll sample maybe let's have a look at the bottom end of a section, and then we'll just drop that in somewhere like that to give us our nice straight line across. Now what I don't want to do is sample the same region every time, but I'm going to work my way down to find out whether there are any other errors. This is all pretty good here. There's a bit of a problem just around this area, so let me sample a region maybe here, and then we'll try and just stamp that one in, something like that. That's pretty neat and tidy. Well, in fact, that whole region works quite well, but again, I don't want to be sampling the same piece each time, so I'm going to go in again and I'll sample something over here. I'm sampling the corner section there, which I can then add over here. Do that kind of thing. Looking pretty good. Again, I'll sample a different one this time. So each time I'm trying to avoid any repetition in pattern, which is what we discussed previously. Again, I'm going to go in the Alt key, select a corner, and each time I'm doing this, I'm kind of going for a piece of brickwork that is a little bit nondescript. It's not got any obvious little flags or signposts that say this is going to repeat or anything of that sort. Just for the sake of it, let's go in and we'll grab one from a different side. Now the colour of this is a little bit different to the one at the back, rather the other one, but it just kind of overlay it nicely. We've got that kind of softened edge of the brush, so it works reasonably well. And we've only got a few more to go, so let's go in, use the Alt key. Let's have a look. That's an interesting one, maybe something like that one. It's quite nice. We'll hover over, we'll stamp, something like that. I will stamp that one in. Again, we'll take maybe that one. Just decide where we want that to go. Put it in there, somewhere like that. And then we'll do one more, maybe that one. And we'll get that one in there. That one's actually just, it's a slightly non-sort of straight brick, but it'll work. Now the bottom section here, we're going to have to completely recreate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample a region that is quite far away from that. So maybe I'll have to sample the top section. Sorry, that one, sample, spacebar. Then we're going to work our way across and think, right, so which section are we interested in? It should really probably have been a bottom section I sampled, not a top section. So we'll go across here, use the Alt key, sample a bottom section, and then we'll see what we end up with. The opacity is quite low on this. I'm just going to up the opacity slightly so when it stamps, I know it's going to stamp it down. So again, I'm sampling this whole region from somewhere else. I do need to be careful, like things like this has not quite worked, but I'm going to try and get the entire bottom section in, and then I'm going to kind of worry about the next bit. So all bottom section, we'll go in maybe something like that. Try and match that in the middle. That one, just come in here. I'll re-alt there. Maybe something like that. We've got a little bit of a disparity there, so maybe I'll try and just tidy that up with a alternate corner. So I'm going to take that corner and just pull that down or something. Okay, that's not too bad. There's a few errors here and there. That definitely is a problem. So we'll use the Alt key. We'll go in, we'll sample a region. We'll go up here, we'll pull that down. We'll probably use the end of that as well. Okay, so something like that has improved the bottom section there. So I think we've got, in terms of the horizontal, we've got a very good tileable texture there. So what we'll do, of course, we will save our image. We should always save our images as we go along. I've got my brick wall. I'm going to call it brick wall edit, so we know which one it is. I've noticed I saved it as a Photoshop file. I'll resave that just to show you something actually. So save as, edit, make sure you maintain layers. That should by default be ticked on, so make sure you've got that done. I'll replace that one. Okay, we'll create a clone of that one, again keeping our archive. I'm going to go back in and we're going to go filter, other, offset. We'll go -1000 to take it back to where it started off. Right, so let's have a look at our vertical tile. Let's see what we've got there. So we're going to go into select, or rather filter, other, offset. We'll put that back to 0 again because it's remembered my last value. We're going to very slightly offset this vertically, so we'll maybe do it maybe 300, something like that. And let's see if we can find out where our offset is running it along vertically. It's not obvious actually, which is actually quite a good thing. Let's have a look. It is actually quite tileable without doing much work on it. I can't offhand see where the offset is. Let's go a very small amount. I think that's pretty neat. I think it's probably about here, the offset. No, I think that's pretty tidy actually. I think if we did find an issue with that, then we'd just do exactly the same thing again. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put a bigger offset just to check test. I think there is a very slight problem there, which we'll try and fix. Okay, so I'm going to go 400. Come in here, and I think that is where the line was. I can see there's a problem there, and there's a problem here. So we're just going to go in. We'll tidy those bits up. I think we will tidy this one up. Although that said, I think we're probably okay. I'm going to leave it like that because I'm pretty confident that that will work now. So we will leave it there. If you did need to, work on the horizontal and the vertical, then obviously do the same process, go through them. I'm going to go back to my duplicated layer because I'm happy that that actually will function, will work. In the next video clip, we're going to look at how we can just do a little extra thing to this to make it look even better in Maya. We'll work it in Maya, but for now we will leave it there.